Yeah, in all the dramas and shows about superheroes, the general public are cowardly and weak and pathetic. Only supermen can get something done. And now I go out and look at the public. They're so incredibly timid from just the way they were 20, 30 years ago when I was in high school and college. I mean, I'm not some tough guy. I'm not some adventurer. People think it's bold to go hang up posters against the government now. That's nothing. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, this is very much a time of a fork in the road, and which, fork we take is completely in our power to decide. But it's a fork in the road between those that are getting pulled more and more into the five senses and the narrow, myopic perception of reality and personal power, and those that are awakening to the opposite. And what happens when you awaken to that greater self is something else happens, which you kind of alluded to earlier, which is that you start to get energized, because the more that we are imprisoned and enslaved in the bubble, that bubble is a bubble of energy as well as a bubble of awareness, and thus it constantly limits the amount of energy that we're actually working with. When you open your mind and let consciousness in, with that comes not only greater insight and greater awareness, but what comes with it is greater actual energy and vibrance and vitality because of what we're letting in.
Well said, David Icke. Let's look at what's happening in the five-sense world, straight ahead and beyond. I had tried everything. I'd come. Strange days have found us, my friends. They've come to destroy us. All right, I want to talk with David Icke in this short segment, long segment's coming up, about the endgame master plan. I know he's written about it, he's talked about it, he's got a new book coming out, and I agree with a lot of his analysis about the nature of these people, whether they're delusional or not, who they think they are, what they're into, the occult, the fact that they see us as animals, the fact that they love suffering and pain. They're not like a normal person. It's a guild of psychopaths. And then some. They certainly believe what David Icke says they believe. Now, whether that is the case or not, whether they are what they think they are, the point is these people are out of their minds. They are totally and completely out of their minds and involved in eugenics, poisoning our food and water on record. David, this stuff's all coming out now. The Rockefeller documents, the UN's announcing they want to reduce population. Time Magazine, Newsweek are saying kill old people, kill children up to age 3. They're trying to get everybody just to accept pure evil that every culture knows is bad as good and say that good is bad. And they're now coming out in autopsy reports I saw a few months ago where most people that are now having autopsies done, they're finding nanotech in the brain that's in a lot of the processed foods. They've got designer viruses to try to make us submit, that, quote, make us not be angry anymore, that literally eat parts of our brain. That's mainstream news. So how do we stand up against that? These super weapons, these things they're about to deploy and are already testing on us. Because you talk about consciousness, everything they do now is targeted at the unconscious. That's why if you're somewhat awake, it's cartoonishly ridiculous. But for those that are in the trance state, they're believing everything the magician tells them. I mean, I'm babbling here, but you get where I'm going with this. What is their master plan? What is the technocracy, the drones, the control grid? What is it all about? Where do they want to take us with this?
Well, the thing is about mind, body, and consciousness is it's my feeling very strongly after nearly a quarter of a century of researching this full time that they have a frequency range which they are, if you like, it's their home stadium. And it's basically the frequency range of body-mind. It's the five senses and a bit deeper into the subconscious from there. When people become truly not awake, it was a good point you made earlier, and it's a point I make all the time. None of us are awake because the potential of full awakeness, which is to be all that is, has been, and ever can be in full awareness, is rather difficult through these biological body computers that we call the human body, which are filtering, and they're full of programs to filter and
our Earth suit interface is limited.
Yeah, very. But within that limitation, you can become massively more aware and massively more conscious than humanity is, beyond imagination, more conscious. And once you enter those states, you're no longer playing away from home. You're no longer playing in their stadium. Not only can you see things that you can't see through the five senses, because it's basically looking, through the wrong end of a telescope when you get caught in the five senses alone. But you can also disconnect energetically from them, and they don't have the same impact upon you. Like someone who has an awakening consciousness, their frequency, and everyone's vibrating to a frequency. That's why they want DNA databases, or one of the reasons is because from the DNA they can assess and find the exact frequency that someone's vibrating or broadcasting on, and therefore they can fire technology like energy weapons at them.
And by the way, the mystics said that thousands of years ago in every culture. Now they've proven DNA is really an antenna, and that 96% they said was junk is not junk at all.
Well, this is an important point. It's something I've gone into very, very deeply in the last little while, and I am today. I've been sitting in this seat now for 13 and a half hours since 5 o'clock this morning, actually working on some of that stuff. And, what is happening is, there's a Russian scientific research, there's some been done in America, where they found a language. This is so important. They found a language within the 98% or whatever of what they call junk DNA or non-coding DNA, which officially they don't know what it does. But these research teams have found a language in there, and it's a language that does not relate to the same coding as the few percent of DNA that they think, but not really, but they think they know about. And what they've also found, interestingly, is that this DNA language reflects the patterns of human language, because some people, linguists and what have you, that have looked deeply at this, they found that the patterns of the English language, the patterns of languages from South America and Africa and etc., actually, although they sound different, their actual patterns are the same. And
everything is an expression of the DNA. Stay there. This is the heaviest info. We'll be right back.
We're on the mark.
Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Central, noon to 3 Eastern. We're here live. Thank you for joining us.
Georgia, he was looking for a soul to steal. He was in a
Our guest is David Icke. He'll be with us about 15, 20 minutes in the next hour, and we'll be taking some phone calls later in the hour. If you'd like to join us with any questions or comments, 800-259-9231, specifically for myself or David Icke, 800-259-9231. Now, again, I've studied eugenics. I wanted to discover what the globalists actually believe. They're occultist. They believe that they are the descendants of advanced extraterrestrials. They call it directed transspermia. And I have broken down the secrets of Prometheus leaked. That film, that clip I did has about 500,000 views on YouTube, so you know you're finding the right one. And I'm not saying I believe this. I'm saying the global controllers say this. And by the 1850s, and I'm talking Galton, the Wedgwoods, the Huxleys, the Darwins, if you go back and read, and we've got all this research, the Darwins and all of them thought they were starmen. H.G. Wells was just their front 50 years later. He worked for those families on record. He wanted world government, a super science class, getting rid of the family, merging with machines. They envisioned this. Darwin, if you look it up, believed he channeled it. That's something they don't like to talk about because they want to make it non-religious. No, it's religious. It's totally religious. And you see as I predicted accurately, because I had the script, in Prometheus, it's really humans that seated themselves on Earth. That's what the globalists believe. They believe that they are made in the image of God, but that they are God and that the aliens are God. And that they have been genetically basically spliced. And you can argue that's the kind of stuff that's in the Old Testament and things. But the point is, whether you believe this or not, I don't want the New York Times saying I'm saying this. This is what the establishment believes. And if you look at the ancient symbol, several thousand years old, the caduceus symbol, I'm halfway pronouncing it right, the two twisted snakes, the symbol of medicine, and then you look at the symbol of DNA, there it is. Now, again, the point is there's a lot of things the controllers know that the general public doesn't know. But if you really study them, you realize what David's saying. The actual controllers themselves are enslaved and locked in, and they're very into programming. They're very into ritual. Look at the Queen of England and all the things they do. The truth is they're only in power because they're ruthless. They're like cancer. Doesn't mean it's dominant. Okay, David, I'm ranting. You've got the floor. Break down what I'm getting into here. If you have any comments on Prometheus.
Well, yeah. Well, I could talk for the next 3 or 4 hours on this subject after researching it in such depth for so long, and I'll give you my fix of it after all this time. What movies like Prometheus and so many others are doing now, they're telling us, and it's a part in a big way about preparing us and programming our perception to accept it, that there was extraterrestrial non-human intervention in human genetics. I've got a grandson who's I think he's about 5 now. I think just past 5. And I was round at his house the other day, and he was reading this little book, and this book was for kids of his age, and it was a story about shape-shifting hybrids, hybrid genetic people and super people and all the rest of it, all the stuff that you're getting in these movies. This is basically what happened. Human genetics was manipulated to turn us into a slave race. And it was done by encoding junk DNA, non-coding DNA, with emotional and perception programs, which if we get pulled only into the 5 senses and the lower mind, then those programs run our lives. And it is quite possible, people will be shocked by this, but it is very possible and probably very likely, it's not uncommon, that people can go through their entire lives without having an original thought or emotional response that hasn't come from the DNA biological software program. Now, these bloodlines, these so-called elite bloodlines, they are different. They are different because they've got a different programming. They were specifically created with programs running in their junk DNA, which delete, first of all, and my goodness me, this will explain a lot of things, which delete the ability to manifest or feel empathy. They have no ability to feel empathy or to put themselves in the feelings of those who they target, their victims. None at all. 3,000 dead on 9/11, pepper bombing Tripoli, not a problem. Making kids starve in Africa in a world of plenty, not a problem. There's no emotional consequence. They cannot decode it. They cannot filter it. And the other thing that's in that's in their DNA is that it is programmed to worship these entities as gods. And this is what Satanism is about. Satanism is making human sacrifice to the gods. Now, who are the gods? They operate outside of human sight, which is pathetically narrow. What scientists call visible light, which is the only frequency range that we can decode into what we see as a world of the conscious mind, is so tiny, it's unbelievable. Even mainstream science says that the electromagnetic spectrum is about 0.005% of what exists in the universe, in mass, matter, and all the rest of it. Some people, scientists say it's a bit wider than that, but not by much. And visible light is only a tiny fraction of that 0.005% or a little bit more in the eyes of some scientists. So we're actually basically blind. And now, I've got a quote here from an article on DNA, which says this: from the characteristic form of this giant molecule, a wound double helix, the DNA represents an ideal electromagnetic antenna. On one hand, it is elongated and thus a blade which can take up very well electrical pulses.